You're not improving. You're destroying yourself. And the more discipline you force, the more productivity you chase, the further you get from who you really are. Carl Jung discovered why 90% of people fail at self-improvement. They're fighting the wrong part of themselves. In this video, you'll understand the brutal mistake keeping you trapped in this cycle, and the disturbing truth nobody tells you about real transformation. Here's what's really happening. Every morning you wake up with a list. Meditate, exercise, read, journal, optimize. You're at war with your impulses, your desires, your weaknesses. You think you're building a better version of yourself. But Jung would tell you something that might shatter everything you believe about personal growth. You're not building, you're burying. There's a part of you that you've been trying to kill for years. Maybe it's your anger, your laziness, your selfishness, your fear. Whatever it is, you've labeled it as bad, something that needs to be eliminated, destroyed, conquered. And every self-improvement guru, every productivity hack, every motivational video tells you the same thing. Discipline will set you free. Just push harder. Just be better. But here's the problem. That part you're trying to kill? Jung called it the shadow. And it's not your enemy. It's you. The shadow is everything you've rejected about yourself. Every trait you've been taught is unacceptable. Every impulse you've learned to suppress. Every emotion you've been told makes you weak. And when you declare war on your shadow, you're not improving yourself. You're fragmenting yourself. Think about it. How many times have you succeeded at self-improvement only to collapse weeks later? How many times have you maintained perfect discipline until you suddenly binge, procrastinate, or self-sabotage? That's not weakness. That's your shadow screaming for attention. Because here's what nobody tells you. The shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It grows, it festers, it waits, and eventually, it erupts. Jung studied this for decades. He watched perfect people, the most disciplined, the most controlled, the most improved, suddenly explode into their worst behaviors. The health fanatic who develops an eating disorder, the productivity machine who burns out completely, the spiritual seeker who becomes judgmental and rigid. Why? Because they never integrated their shadow. They just built a prettier prison. So, if your self-improvement feels like a constant battle, if you're exhausted from trying to be better, if you keep failing at the same goals over and over, maybe you're not failing, maybe you're fighting the wrong war. But what if there's another way? What if the key to real transformation isn't destroying parts of yourself, but understanding why they exist in the first place? That's exactly what Jung discovered. And it changes everything about how you approach growth. Jung had a term for the mask you wear every day. He called it the persona. It's the you that shows up for the world. The polished version, the acceptable version, the improved version. And right now, your persona is probably killing you. Because here's what's happening. You've spent years crafting this perfect image. You wake up at 5 a.m., you hit the gym, you eat clean, you're productive, disciplined, optimized. On the outside, you look like you've mastered self-improvement. But on the inside, you're exhausted, anxious, empty. Why? Because your persona isn't you. It's a performance. Jung observed something disturbing in his patients. The ones who appeared most together were often the most psychologically fragmented. They had successfully eliminated all their negative traits from their conscious identity. But those traits didn't disappear. They just went underground, into the shadow. And here's the brutal truth. Every positive habit you force onto yourself without understanding why you resist it is just another brick in your persona's wall. Every time you shame yourself for being lazy, every time you punish yourself for being weak, every time you reject a part of your nature, you're not improving, you're dissociating. Let me give you an example. There's a man, let's call him Marcus. Marcus is the embodiment of discipline. He runs a successful business, works out daily, never misses a deadline. Everyone admires him. He admires himself. Until one day he can't get out of bed. Not for a day, not for a week, for months. What happened? His shadow finally won. Because Marcus never asked why he needed to be so perfect. He never questioned what he was running from. He just kept adding more discipline, more control, more improvement. And beneath all that perfection, his shadow was screaming, "I'm exhausted. I'm scared. I need rest." I need permission to be human. But Marcus couldn't hear it, because he'd spent his entire life being told that those feelings were weakness. So he buried them deeper, until his body made the decision for him. Or consider Sarah. Sarah is spiritual, mindful, always positive. She meditates every morning, practices gratitude, radiates good vibes only. But privately, she's judgmental, critical, resentful of people who aren't on their journey. She's become what Jung called the inflated persona, so identified with being good that she's lost touch with her humanity. Her shadow, her anger, her judgment, her darkness didn't disappear. It just found a new costume. Now it wears the mask of spiritual superiority. This is the perfection disease. And it's epidemic in modern self-improvement culture, because we've been sold a lie that you can optimize your way to wholeness, that if you just eliminate enough bad habits and install enough good ones, you'll finally be complete. But Jung discovered something that contradicts everything the self-improvement industry teaches. I'd rather be whole than good. Read that again. Whole, not good, not perfect, not optimized. Whole. Because wholeness means integrating everything you are, including the parts you've been taught to hate. It means having a relationship with your shadow, not a war with it. It means understanding that your anger might be protecting your boundaries, that your laziness might be your body begging for rest, that your fear might be trying to keep you safe. But here's the question nobody asks. What if your resistance to self-improvement isn't a character flaw? What if it's your psyche's way of saying, stop trying to fix me, start trying to understand me? That's where real transformation begins, not in another morning routine, not in another productivity system, but in the uncomfortable work of meeting yourself, all of yourself, for the first time. And Jung gave us a map for how to do it. So if fighting your shadow doesn't work, and building a perfect persona is a trap, what's the answer? Jung called it individuation, and it's the complete opposite of what you've been taught about self-improvement. Individuation isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. It's not about eliminating parts of yourself. It's about integrating them. And this process, it's messy. It's uncomfortable. It requires you to do something most people will never have the courage to do. Face the parts of yourself you've spent your entire life running from. Here's how it works. Instead of asking, how do I get rid of my anger? You ask, what is my anger trying to tell me? Instead of shaming yourself for procrastination, you get curious. What am I avoiding? What does this resistance protect me from? This is shadow work. And it's not some abstract spiritual concept. It's a practical psychological process that Jung used with thousands of patients. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Step 1. Identify what you reject in yourself. What trait makes you feel ashamed? What behavior do you constantly try to fix? That's your shadow knocking on the door. Most people spend their lives pretending they don't hear it. You're going to open the door. Step 2. Dialogue with it. Jung developed a technique called active imagination. Essentially, you have a conversation with the rejected part of yourself. Not to defeat it, not to convince it to change, but to understand it. Sounds crazy, right? But here's what happens when you actually do this. You discover that your laziness is actually your body's wisdom, telling you you're burned out. You realize your selfishness is actually a healthy boundary that you've been taught to feel guilty about. You find out that your anger is protecting something valuable that's been violated. Your shadow isn't random. It's intelligent. It has reasons. And when you stop fighting it and start listening to it, something remarkable happens. It transforms. Because here's the secret Jung discovered. Integrated anger becomes assertiveness. Integrated fear becomes caution and wisdom. Integrated selfishness becomes healthy self-respect. The traits you've been trying to kill, they're not your enemies. They're your allies wearing disguises. But let's be clear about something crucial. Integration is not indulgence. Accepting your anger doesn't mean punching walls. Understanding your laziness doesn't mean never working again. This isn't permission to act out every impulse. Integration means bringing unconscious patterns into consciousness. It means having a relationship with these parts of yourself instead of being controlled by them. When your shadow is unconscious, It controls you. When it's integrated, you have choice. Think about it this way. Right now, your shadow is like a child locked in a basement, screaming to be heard. And every time it screams, you turn up the music of productivity and discipline to drown it out. But that child doesn't stop screaming, it just gets louder, more desperate, until eventually, it breaks down the door. Individuation is about going down to that basement, sitting with that child and asking, what do you need? Why are you here? What are you trying to protect? And here's where this gets really powerful. When you do this work, your entire relationship with self-improvement changes. You stop trying to become someone else. You start becoming more fully yourself. And if this perspective is shifting something in you, if you're starting to see self-improvement differently, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because we're going deeper into philosophy and psychology that actually transforms lives, not just optimizes schedules. But I know what you're thinking. This sounds great in theory, but how does this actually work in my daily life? In a world that demands productivity, performance, and perfection? That's exactly what we need to talk about next. Because Jung's wisdom isn't just for the therapy room. It's a rebellion against everything modern culture tells you about success. Let's talk about what this actually means for your life right now. Because you're living in a culture that's completely at war with Jungian wisdom. Every algorithm, every social media feed, every productivity guru is screaming the same message. Optimize, perform, improve, eliminate weakness, maximize output, be more, do more, become more. And Jung is whispering something dangerous. Stop performing, start being. This is a rebellion, and it requires you to completely flip how you see progress. Here's what the modern self-improvement industrial complex won't tell you. Your procrastination might be the smartest thing about you right now. Not because procrastination is good, but because it's information. Think about it. You have this project you keep avoiding. Every productivity system says, just do it. Discipline over motivation. Push through. But what if your procrastination is your unconscious mind saying, this path is wrong. This goal isn't actually yours. You're chasing someone else's definition of success. What if your resistance isn't the problem? What if it's the solution trying to emerge? This is where Jungian psychology becomes radical, because it suggests that your symptoms, your anxiety, your self-sabotage, your failures, aren't obstacles to overcome. They're messages to decode. Your anxiety isn't just chemical imbalance. It's your psyche telling you that you're living out of alignment with your true nature. Your burnout isn't just exhaustion. It's your shadow finally forcing you to stop and listen. Your bad habits? They're coping mechanisms for needs you haven't acknowledged. So here's the new framework. Stop trying to kill your vices. Start asking what they're feeding. You're addicted to scrolling social media. Don't just delete the app and white-knuckle through it. Ask, what am I avoiding? What discomfort am I numbing? What part of my life feels so unbearable that I need constant distraction? You can't stick to your goals. Don't just add more discipline. Ask, are these actually my goals? Or am I trying to become someone I think I should be instead of who I actually am? You keep self-sabotaging right before success? Don't just push harder. Ask, what part of me is terrified of what success means? What would I have to give up? What identity would I have to let die? This is the difference between self-improvement and individuation. Self-improvement says, fix the behavior. Individuation says, understand the psyche. And here's what's beautiful about this approach. When you actually integrate your shadow, when you actually understand what your resistance is protecting, the behavior often changes naturally, not through force, through awareness. Let me give you a concrete example. You know that voice in your head that says you're not good enough, the one that drives you to work harder, achieve more, prove yourself. Most self-improvement advice says, replace negative self-talk with positive affirmations. But Jung would ask, where did that voice come from? Whose voice is it really? What is it trying to protect you from? And when you actually investigate, you might discover it's your father's voice, or your childhood bullies, or a culture that told you your worth is measured by your productivity. And suddenly, you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're seeing the pattern. you're understanding the wound. That's when real healing happens. Not when you force yourself to think positive, but when you understand why you learned to think negatively in the first place. This is the modern rebellion, refusing to optimize yourself into oblivion, refusing to treat yourself like a machine that needs better programming, refusing to wage war on your own humanity. Because here's the truth that terrifies the self-improvement industry. You're not broken. You never were. You're just disconnected from yourself. And all those flaws you're trying to eliminate, they're breadcrumbs leading you back home. Your depression might be your psyche's way of saying, the life you're living isn't the life you're meant for. Your anger might be the boundary you've been too afraid to set. Your fear might be the wisdom you've been ignoring. So what if you stopped trying to improve yourself and started trying to understand yourself? What if you stopped asking, how do I become better? And started asking, how do I become whole? What if the person you've been trying to become is actually further from your truth than the person you are right now? That's the question that changes everything. And it leads us to the most important part. What do you actually do with this? How do you start this journey? How do you take the first step toward wholeness instead of perfection? Let me show you exactly where to begin. So here's where we are. You've spent years trying to improve yourself. And maybe, just maybe, you've been asking the wrong question the entire time. The question isn't, how do I become better? The question is, how do I become whole? And that shift, that single shift in perspective, changes everything about how you move through life. Because self-improvement is built on a lie. The lie that you're fundamentally broken and need fixing. That there's a better version of you waiting on the other side of enough discipline, enough optimization, enough self-control. But Jung discovered something that the entire self-improvement industry desperately wants you to ignore. You're already complete. You're just fragmented. You've just been taught to reject parts of yourself. And every time you reject another part, you become less whole, not more. So what does wholeness actually look like? It's not perfection. It's not having your life completely together. It's not never feeling anger or fear or laziness again. Wholeness is having a conscious relationship with all of it. It's knowing your shadow exists and choosing how to work with it instead of being controlled by it. It's understanding that your darkness isn't something to eliminate. It's something to integrate. And here's what's powerful about this. When you stop fighting yourself, you suddenly have all that energy available for actually living. When you stop trying to be someone else, you can finally discover who you actually are. So let me give you 3 concrete steps you can take right now. Not tomorrow, not when you're ready, right now. First, identify one trait you hate about yourself. One behavior you're constantly trying to fix. One part of your personality you wish didn't exist. Write it down. That's your shadow speaking. Second, instead of asking, how do I get rid of this? Ask, what is this protecting? Because every shadow trait has a function. Your anger might be protecting your boundaries. Your fear might be protecting you from real danger. Your laziness might be protecting you from burnout. Third, have a conversation with it. I know this sounds strange, but try it. Sit down, close your eyes, and imagine that rejected part of yourself as a person sitting across from you. Ask it, why are you here? What do you need? What are you trying to tell me? And then, this is crucial. Listen. Don't argue. Don't try to convince it to change. Just listen. You might be shocked by what you discover. Because here's what Jung understood that most people never learn. The goal of life isn't to become perfect. The goal is to become yourself, your actual self. Not the self your parents wanted, not the self society demands, not the self Instagram celebrates, yourself. Jung said it perfectly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you think you should be, not who you're trying to become, who you already are, underneath all the masks, all the performance, all the self-improvement. And here's the paradox that might break your brain. When you stop trying to improve and start trying to integrate, you actually transform, not into someone else, into a more complete version of yourself. The anger you integrate becomes strength. The fear you understand becomes wisdom. The selfishness you accept becomes healthy boundaries. The laziness you decode becomes rest and restoration. But it only transforms when you stop fighting it. When you stop treating yourself like an enemy to conquer and start treating yourself like a mystery to understand. So here's my question for you. What if you don't need to be fixed? What if you just need to be seen? All of you, even the parts you've been hiding. What if the person you've been trying to become through all this self-improvement is actually less authentic than the person you are right now, with all your flaws, all your darkness, all your humanity? What if self-improvement isn't the answer? What if self-integration is? Stop improving. Start becoming. Not better. Not perfect. Not optimized. Just whole. That's the journey Jung mapped. That's the path most people are too afraid to walk. But if you're still here, if something in this message resonated with you, then maybe you're ready. Ready to stop performing and start being. Ready to stop fighting and start integrating. Ready to stop improving and start becoming. The shadow is waiting, not as your enemy, but as the missing piece of yourself you've been searching for all along. Welcome to the real work. Welcome to individuation. Welcome home.